It's almost the end of February and it continues to rain in the southeast U.S. Will this pattern continue, and can we expect more flooding for the end of winter and into spring? Jeff, Aaron, and I will provide some background and some forecasts that will answer those questions in the February edition of the Water Resources Outlook. Jeff will start us off with a look at our recent rainfall.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Well, we are almost through February, which is typically a cool and wet month for the Southeast. Here's the last 30 days of precipitation from our quality-controlled multi-sensor precipitation estimates. And we see the large area of pink and red across parts of northern Mississippi and Alabama, and encompassing all the Tennessee River Valley and lower Ohio River Valley, with several areas receiving over 8 inches of rain for the month, with some more than 15 inches there in the purple colors. This has been the storm pattern the last month, with the wet weather to the north and actually some dryness to the south. So how does this compare to normal? Well, we actually have been dry across the Gulf Coast into a good portion of Georgia and into the coastal Carolina region. The wet weather has been confined to the north, with most of the headwaters except there in South Florida. Since the beginning of the year, again, we see the top ends of the larger rivers getting the precipitation with more normal rainfall, which wet is normal for February across most of the coastal plain and Piedmont portions of the southeast. So how have stream flows been taking all this? Well, it's been an ongoing story. We really have not seen a chance for stream flows to begin to fall out since late last spring. In fact, cumulatively, stream flows have been high for a prolonged period of time. We usually do not see this. Looking at the fall into the winter, when we look at the USGS stream flow runoff data, which is the data calculated by taking the stream flow data for a defined watershed and dividing it by the basin area, we see 4 of the last 5 months in the southeast, Huck 2, or better defined by the U.S. Geological Survey as the South Atlantic Gulf. We ranked in the top 3 relative to the other 58 years of data from 1960 to 2018. Cumulatively, when we look at all 5 months together, September through January, relative to other years, the stream flow runoff ranks number 1. This has posed issues with too much water, as you can imagine, in our reservoirs at times, and with above normal river flooding all winter. So how did we get to this point? The easiest way to see this is by looking at the USGS area-based state runoff duration hydrographs. And we see that the wet weather actually started back in the late spring, 2018. May was an unusually very wet month, and an above normal to normal rainfall in the summer set the table for above normal river flood threat going into the tropical season. We were hoping to see a quiet season, but that didn't happen. We had 4 storms in late May. 4 storms affect the southeast, which is above average. Usually we see the 2 to 3. Alberto hit the Gulf in late May. The Florence hit in September in the Carolinas, and then Michael in the Gulf into the Carolinas in October. The wet weather and active southern jet stream made for a wet November, December, and January, continuing high stream flows from Alabama into the Carolinas, as the graphs show. We have had a small reprieve here in February relative to early winter, but the typical river flood season lasts several more weeks. So that is where we are, and Todd will talk more on where we may go and future river flood threat. But before that, let's just quickly look at the reservoirs. As you can imagine, especially with the recent prolonged rainfall event here last week, many reservoirs are above their target pools, especially the ones that have flood storage there, like the Corps of Engineers Carter's Dam there in North Georgia, Allatoona Dam, and Lanier there in Georgia, as well as Weiss and Lewis Smith in Alabama. Lake Hartwell over there in the Savannah at 5 feet above target. The blue numbers there are this morning's pools, and the green and red numbers, those are the deviations from the rule curve. Going east into the Carolinas, again, many pools above their rule curve, holding back water in many cases to keep flooding at bay downstream. The one exception there is Lake Murray near Columbia, South Carolina, and they've been drawing down their pool all winter. And this has been to reduce nutrients in the lake and for water quality, but have had a bit of time actually trying to do this, keeping the lake down with all the high stream flows. And finally, as far as drought there is none. Some abnormally dry conditions there you see in the yellow, but drought does not appear to be an issue at this time. What about the future long-term drought and flood? Todd will talk about that a little bit later, but before that, here's Aaron with the short-term meteorology.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Now we'll take a look at some of the meteorology expected over the next couple weeks. Overall, ample moisture will remain over the southeast U.S. through early next week, serving to prolong this wet and active weather that we've been seeing. Looking at the short term, scattered showers and thunderstorms are expected to spread from Mississippi to the Carolinas through Thursday morning as a warm front surges north from the Gulf. By Thursday afternoon, this will be replaced by a cold front moving south from the Tennessee Valley, continuing to provide forcing for shower chances into at least Friday mornings. Things should quiet down briefly from Friday evening and into Saturday afternoon when a strong cold front begins moving through the area once again. The heaviest rains of the next week are expected to come as this cold front passes Saturday evening through Monday morning. By Sunday morning, areas along southern Mississippi and Alabama and into central Georgia will see the higher rainfall totals. By Monday morning, the area of heaviest rain will move eastward, spanning from southwest Alabama to the North Carolina coast. A much colder and drier air mass behind the front will then be in place until late next week and could bring some wintry precipitation to portions of North Carolina and Virginia Sunday night. Looking at the forecast rainfall totals for the next 7 days, you can see much of the southeast U.S. north of and including the Florida Panhandle will see in the neighborhood of 2 inches of rain, with some areas approaching 4 inches plus. While some of this will come through the day Thursday, the heavier rains are expected late Saturday through early Monday along that stronger cold front, with much of this 7-day total coming over the next 5 days. Looking at the longer-range temperature forecast, we can see the effects of the cold air mass behind the weekend front as the Climate Prediction Center has much of the CONUS with below normal temperatures in the 8 to 14-day outlook. The coldest temperatures will be felt early in the week, and despite some moderation by late week, temperatures will remain well below normal. And looking at the week 2 precipitation, CPC is expecting above normal precipitation for parts of the southeast over the long term. However, this is just barely above equal chances of normal precipitation and is predicated on a strong system late in the period, so it is far from a slam dunk as strength, track, and timing changes of the system are likely to come over the next 2 weeks. And now we'll hand it off to Todd for a look at the longer range expectations.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, I haven't shown our ENSO forecast recently because we've been talking about it for so long. We talked about it through the summer and into the fall, and then we kind of took a break as we saw all that. But I think it's important today to show that we have an El Nino advisory in effect, and it's because our temperatures are warm across the equatorial Pacific, and that those conditions are expected to continue through spring and weaken as we get close to summer. Since last summer, we have been forecasting a wet winter, mostly attributing it to expected El Nino conditions. And for the most part, the wet conditions have come true for the southeast U.S., but not completely. Let's take a look at what is typical for El Nino. Typically, it's warm in the northern tier of the U.S. The Ohio and Tennessee valleys are dry, and much of the southeast stays cool and wet. As Jeff showed, we've been near normal over most of the southeast, at least for the last month, except for the areas along the Appalachians, from Mississippi all the way through Virginia. The Ohio and Tennessee Valley have been anything but dry, and much of the northern tier has seen record cold. While I admit that we have been damp, our temperatures have been a little warmer than normal. So our weather pattern has been active and wet, as mentioned by Aaron, and will be shown by me in the longer lead outlook. That active weather pattern is likely to continue, keeping the area wet. So we got the forecast right, but we got a little lucky in that it has been more to do with the persistent weather pattern than the global scale climate pattern. So as we look ahead, here's some of the model output addressing the precipitation forecast. This is used by the Climate Prediction Center to help make the forecasts. And nearly all of the model output indicates wet weather in the southeast U.S. You can pause, look at it a little closer if you would like, but most of our guidance indicates continued wet weather. And this is why the Climate Prediction Center forecasts look like they do. Temperatures across much of the central U.S. will remain below normal as cold Arctic air will continue to plunge south and keep things cold all the way to the Texas coast. The cold air doesn't quite seep into the southeast, and it looks like over the month of March the area will stay somewhat warm. With that, the precipitation forecast unfortunately looks wet. A continued chance for above normal rainfall follows us into March. The seasonal outlook for temperatures going through from March through May indicates continued warm in the southeast, with above normal precipitation chances for nearly two-thirds, the southern two-thirds of the country. The model output that was shown earlier indicates this, and the current pattern is not likely to change too much, at least in the early part of March. So to answer the question I asked in the intro, yes, it does look like this will be a wet end of winter and early spring. So the bottom line, in the short term, we look to remain in an active rainfall pattern and flooding is likely to continue. And the long term doesn't look a whole lot different as March continues to look wet and will likely stay active into April, which will make our early spring and into mid-spring probably some flooding. And so we're going to have to watch that very closely. But we will be back next month. Our next Water Resources Outlook is expected to be recorded on March 26th. I know we've shown a lot of graphs and a lot of interesting different things. If you have any questions about any of the graphs or any of the things that we've put on there, please feel free to contact us and ask us questions about what we put on there and what we're using. We look forward to talking to you again next month. Have a good one.